Hello, teachers, and welcome. I am so excited to be your keynote speaker today. Our topic we're going to talk about is so exciting. It's not only time management, but it's time management for teachers and 10 time management best practices that work. I'm Serena Pariser. I'm the best-selling author of Real Talk About Classroom Management on the left and Real Talk About Time Management on the right. And today we're going to focus all about time management for you. So in my time management book with my co-author, we were asked to dig deep in the research, and the research specifically not only for time management, but time management for you. The reason we dug deep with the research is because you honestly don't have time to do it. So we did it for you. We looked through journal articles, we interviewed teachers, and we came up with 10 of the best strategies. So I want to start with some startling facts that we found when we first started writing the book. Roughly 61% of educators said their work was always or often stressful, compared with American workers in general, citing that their work was stressful 30% of the time. So 61 versus 30. Now, here's something that kind of hits your heart. However, it's also been reported that 96% of teachers love their job. So what profession does 96% of the people in it report loving it? So we see an issue here. A little bit stressed, a little bit, the workload's a little bit too much, but 96% of you love your job. And so that's what motivated us to kind of write this book. Today, I'm going to give you best practices to help you manage your time and give you more energy. So who wouldn't want more of that? But I'm going to back up a second and talk about what kind of brought me to this place. This was my first year teaching, and I was not always the best time manager. This was my class on a good day. And I remember I was hired to teach sixth grade math at a charter school in West Philadelphia. And I went to Penn State University and got a 7th through 12th um, English language arts degree. So this is before No Child Left Behind. So you can imagine how my class went that year. I remember just kind of putting textbooks on the desks were in rows. And after school, I spent most of my nights calling parents. I remember locking my door after the students left at 3:30 because I needed a second to cry. Um, I was in reactive mode and I didn't want the parents in the hallway that were visiting other teachers to see me with a puffy face or heaven forbid my students who were only sixth grade. And so I was just really getting by. Time management was not even on my radar. I was in survival mode. And now I would never wish this first year upon you. Hopefully your first year didn't look like this. I was in sink or swim mode. But a few years after this, I moved to California. I ended up kind of like finding my stride. I earned Teacher of the Year at my school. I had an opportunity to work with Fulbright as a consultant with teachers in Botswana. I worked with schools now around the world in Kathmandu and Turkey. And I really got good at time management. And so the publisher asked me, can you, and you can do it with a co-author, write a book on time management, but for teachers, because it's a real issue in our profession. And so I kind of had to learn kind of the hard way, just trying things out. But I'm excited to share a lot of the data that I found to supplement our practices today. And so this is my co-author, Dr. Edward DeRoche. And what we did when we sat down to first start write books, I want to preface this with Edward's written 9 books. He's been principal. He's been dean of a college of education. He's been a elementary and middle school teacher. He's done everything. And he sometimes keeps me on my toes. We're a little bit of a different age range there. But the thing about it is what we're going to talk about are best practices with time management that have been tried and true throughout the test of time. So these best practices have worked over and over and over again, no matter if you're a first year teacher or a year 21 teacher. Okay, so the first thing we did is we sat down and we interviewed colleagues, and we kind of asked them about time management. And the colleagues that we interviewed, the teachers, they said things like, "I have no time. When I arrive to school, I'm trapped between the two covers of the textbook and the four walls of the classroom." And someone else said, "I'm trying to handle 12 to 15-hour days. I almost have no time to do some of the things I should be doing, things that need to get done for the benefit of my students." And another teacher said, "You really want to know how I see it? I'm overworked. I have to attend unproductive meetings and I'm drowning in testing and paperwork." And so if you can relate to any of this, feel free to add things in the chat. We do want the chat to be interactive today. There are certain times through the presentation I'm going to ask you to kind of put your ideas in the chat as well, but you're welcome to chime in at any time. Okay, so we can kind of see the mentality of the teachers here. We asked them in August right before school was starting, and so they were a little bit overwhelmed with all the other things. Then, Edward and I, to add to our fun, we asked if we could give you more minutes in the day, how would you spend your time? And the same 25 teachers said, well, one teacher said, "I wouldn't spend my time answering these survey questions." We were like, "Whoa, okay." The second teacher said, "How can you ask me this question when I'm trying to get my classroom ready for school?" And the third teacher said, and others were too inundated with preparing for a new school year to answer. So we can see that you're really, really busy, and we get it. So I'm going to start with time management. I'm going to call them best practices. They're not strategies. They're not tips. They're not tricks. They're best practices that are research proven for teachers. And number 10 is asking yourself, am I scraping the right car? And so I'm going to read you a story about, that's a credit card that the man's holding. And that's a car, obviously somewhere, maybe up where I am in snowy Minnesota, but it's the dead of winter. There was once a commercial showing that a man coming outside in the morning to find all the cars in a street covered in snow. Approaching the car nearest his house, the man begins to painstakingly scrape snow off the windshield with his briefcase. He then clears off the side mirrors, bracing himself against the cold. All 4 car windows were cleared. Despite the frigid temperature and slipping in the snow at least once, he even cleans out the windshield wipers with his gloved hands. Finally, he clicks his key fob to unlock the door, only to find that the still snow-covered car in front of him is blinking its lights. He had spent an hour cleaning off the wrong car. So what would this misuse of time look like in the classroom? It could look like spending way too much time on one student's behavior in class. Can you think of that student in your class you've had one of these years? It is not going to drive your entire class forward. It could also look like spending hours finding the perfect article to read in class when the article only takes up 20 minutes of your lesson, maybe less. And sometimes it's okay to stop scraping because you are clearing the wrong car. It's not worth it. And here's a mantra to help yourself. When you find yourself spending a lot of time on one thing, am I scraping the right car? Now, scraping the wrong car could also look like, and I've been guilty of it too, is spending 2 days before a school year prepping and making a bulletin board look perfect when it's behind the students. Now, what does scraping the right car look like? Scraping the right car could look like making engaging and rigorous curriculum, keeping open relationships with parents, but efficiently. And once you do this, you'll find that your credit cards will turn into ice scrapers and you're getting more off at once. Are you scraping the right car? Now, the next best practice is so practical and so pragmatic. How many of you have something that looks like this in your classroom or in your home, depending if you're hybrid or virtual right now? On the left, we see an egg timer that we use a lot of times to tell students, okay, we have 15 minutes to do this. On the right, we have something that a lot of people use to cook with. Teachers know we use this to time lessons in our classroom a lot of times, or keep students on task. And so The best practice number 9 is when we find that we have so much to do, get unstuck. Avoid analysis paralysis. How many of you guys have heard that term, analysis paralysis? You can add it in the chat if you have. When you have too much to do, analysis paralysis is what you would think it is. It's when we have so much to do, we become paralyzed and we say, oh my gosh, where do I even start? So this could be an issue, but I'm going to show you the best tool you can use with analysis paralysis is a timer. Now, I urge you not to use your cell phone timers because we can get stuck or drown in everything, all the distractions on our cell phone for days even. These timers, what you do, let's say you're sitting in front of all your things you have to do, whether that's at home or in your classroom, you set a timer for 10 minutes, 10 minutes. Why 10? Because we can do anything for 10 minutes, even things we don't want to do. Now, the reason I say 10 minutes is because you can say to yourself, I only have to do this task for 10 minutes. It can be maybe 11 minutes, maybe 12, but 10 is kind of a good number. Promise yourself that you're able to stop after that 10 minutes. But what you're going to find is that you're probably going to be so pumped by the momentum that you got starting it that you're going to go longer than 10 minutes. You can always go longer, but 10's all you have to do. So you start it for 10 minutes and you get started, whether that be getting started with paperwork, whether that be getting started organizing your classroom. You can even use this with home chores like cleaning the kitchen, but let's keep it on teaching for today. That can be getting started with grading. Grading's a big one. So 10 minutes and then maybe you'll go more. And returning emails. That's a huge one, returning parent emails, administration, colleagues, student. So 10 minutes, get unstuck, use a timer. When it goes off, you decide if you want to do more or stop. But I think you'll probably want to do more. Now, time management best practice number 8 is knowing the difference between busy and productive. So if you noticed, I crossed out the word busy because I think busy is a 4-letter word. If you're walking by a colleague's classroom and you see them doing whatever it is, it's almost impossible as a second party telling if that person's just busy or being productive. The only person that knows that answer is us. Now, let me show you the difference in a chart here. Busy looks like you're stressed out and anxious while you're doing the task. Busy looks like you're in reactive mode. You're rushing to do everything so nothing explodes. You're literally putting out fires. You went into the task with a depleted mindset. The task is started because it honestly can't wait any longer. This is all busy. You have a sense of relief when the task is finished. Example is not being prepared with the lesson. I've been there as well, but we know this as teachers, not being prepared with the lesson leading to multiple student behavior issues. Much time is now needed to call home to parents. You're going to be busy calling home. Answering numerous parent questions one-on-one, very busy, very reactive, and answering numerous student questions about grades one-on-one. I'm going to go into this later in the presentation about how we can actually be more efficient with student grades and parent questions rather than always being one-on-one, which is great sometimes, but not if you have 150 students in a middle or high school class. So on the other hand, what does productive look like? Well, productive looks like doing tasks from start to finish. Productive looks like starting tasks with your tank full and an optimal mindset. Productive looks like you decide when you want to start the task, and productive looks like a sense of accomplishment and happiness, not like a when the task is accomplished. So an example of productive is scheduling a time to prepare materials for a lesson that week before you teach it. I know copy machines in school have this weird Sixth Sense, where they know to break down Monday at 7:45 when the kids are coming in our classroom at 8 o'clock. If you can actually even skeleton out your lessons and then have the copies made, if you're using copies, have the tangible materials ready so you're not going into the lesson unprepared and just busy making copies. You're kind of on top of it. Sending out a semester newsletter so parents can stay up to date with your classroom. So that will kind of curtail the one-to-one questions that come at you and keep you from doing lessons or something for your classroom. And setting aside each week to complete grading and giving students grade reports every 2 weeks. Now, if you're using something like Google Classroom where students always have access to their grades, you could be dealing with something, especially in middle and high school, where you get the, what can I do to bring my grade up? Who's heard of that? Okay, teachers love that question, right? No, we don't actually, because it's a lot if it comes at us one-on-one. So you could do like an every 2 week, we could do office hours where that's specifically where they can talk about grades and they know that, so they can, you kind of take control of that time, and that would be productive. So next is the shiny ball syndrome. And the shiny ball syndrome, think of it like, and this is also busy versus productive. Think of the shiny ball syndrome like a cat, and you're kind of pawing at everything coming your way and distracted. And the shiny ball syndrome is ever so present today with social media, the notifications, the emails that come at us and inundate us every single day. A solution for getting out of the shiny ball syndrome when we feel like a kitten with things being thrown in front of us is, if you're working and something comes in your mind like, oh my gosh, I have to email Jose back about something, or Sarah's mom, write it down. Even if it's something like, oh, I have to call for my child's doctor's appointment. Those are shiny ball thoughts that come in our head. Write it down on a Post-it. Keep doing what you're doing, be productive, and then go to the other things, okay? The other thing we can do is take a minute and unsubscribe from those email lists that we've been a part of that no longer serve us. I was looking through my Gmail as I was making this presentation. I thought, oh my gosh, I have so many emails that are these automated emails that maybe are things I used to do, but I don't go to that yoga studio anymore. Or I don't read that newsletter anymore. I'm not really into that newspaper anymore. There's an unsubscribe button on the bottom. And so that will kind of clear our mind, clear our inbox, so we can really be productive on focus on what we want to do. And if you are able, I would say, take off the notifications on the social media on your phone. Those are shiny balls. Shiny ball syndrome will be in full effect. We might not need to know what Aunt Martha ate for dinner as we're teaching a lesson. We don't need that ding going off. So if you're comfortable with it, if it works with your life, I highly encourage you to take the notifications off, unsubscribe from emails, keep a Post-it note, write it down, and keep going. Now, this is really interesting. And I put a little quote up here we have in the book. There's a teacher that kindly asked her student, Ariella, how much time and attention do you need from me? And Ariella, of course, says, all of it. So how many of us have students like this? These can even be 12th grade students. These can be kindergarten students, but children crave our attention. And this brings me to time management best practice number 7, which is interesting. Relationships save you time in the classroom. So that's a little interesting because we know relationships take time to make, but we're going to look here in this best practice. Relationships actually save us time. So there was a study by Robert Marzano in 2003, and he studied 100 classrooms. And what he found as far as the relationship between relationships and behavioral issues is that teachers that reported having strong teacher-student connection have how many fewer behavior issues? 31%. 31% fewer behavioral issues. Now, that is tremendously important to know. So when we invest time in relationship building with students, whether they're kindergarten, whether they're 12th grade, it's been reported and studied that we will have averaging 31% behavioral issues. Now, what does fewer behavioral issues matter? Why does it matter? I mean, in addition to our overall happiness as a teacher and for the students, behavioral issues take time. Calling parents, talking to the students, restorative justice models. It takes time to mend a broken relationship with a teacher and a student. So if we can get these relationships strong, we have more time. Now, here's the problem. If you are a middle or high school teacher and or maybe a elementary school electives teacher, and you have 150, maybe 200 students, how do you have a strong relationship with all of them? How do you have time to build that? We don't. So unless you're a superwoman teacher, then great, but most of us don't. And so I'm going to show you in this best practice how to efficiently build relationships with your students 3-on-1, 4-on-1, 10-on-1, rather than 1-on-1, just for the sake of time. So efficiently building relationships with students, morning meetings, using student names. It's astounding. Sometimes students say, oh, I just don't like that teacher. That teacher doesn't even know my name. And that may or may not be true, but it's probably because that teacher isn't using that student's name. A student's name is their favorite language or the favorite word in the English language. Use student names. How many times have you been to like a dinner party or outing where you've had someone that you met before and you can tell they don't remember your name? And it creates that distance between you. And they're like, hey, friend, hey. And you're like, Serena, it's Serena. Students know when we don't know their names. And so I used to teach with a seating chart, which students thought I was holding my lesson plan. I wasn't, because I wanted to be able to call Sally by her name and Jose and Juan and not just say, yeah, you can answer this question, but always using names. It will help you build relationships with students, and it takes a millisecond. A quote chat is really great. A lot of you probably already do this. Start the class out with a quote. If it relates to the content, even better. Quotes kind of level the playing field academically with students, and quotes are deep. And so students will be able to connect with you on their thoughts about a quote, and it'll help build those connections. You can do this full class or small group. Celebrations, celebrate birthdays, celebrate when Camille makes a soccer team. You could do like Friday shout outs or something like that, but know that students are valued and heard in your classroom. And enhance your classroom climate, delegate. I remember that I had this door and I used spray paint or chalkboard spray paint, and I would draw like, welcome to Miss Paris's classroom 32. And one student said, Miss Paris, why don't you have any artwork there? And I said, well, you've seen me try to draw. I can't draw. It's going to make it not look that good. And he said, well, Emily can draw. And I thought, why, Emily, do you want to do the door next month? And Emily said, well, can I bring 2 friends? And Emily and 2 other girls from my class did the door. And Emily felt really connected to our classroom and to me for some reason after that, because I delegated that responsibility to her, which gave me more time. But that became a thing in our classroom where every month, 3 or 4 or 5 students even did the door based on the unit we were doing, based on maybe it was fall or winter. But things like that, where you allow students to take control of a certain part of a class, can help build connection. Holding group conferences, we have one-on-one conferences, but what about students 3, 4, 5-on-1? Like if you're doing reading conferences, what about 3 students reading a similar book? That'll help build relationships, because conferencing actually helps you build relationships with students because you're talking to them one-on-one. You don't want a student to have to wait 3 months to kind of get one-on-one time with you or 3-on-1 time with you at your desk. Get to know me activities are really, really powerful. And if you have any ideas of efficiently building relationships with students, can you put them in the chat right now and kind of share ideas that you have, because we're a wealth of knowledge. And family boards, I'm going to get to here. Family boards are wonderful. And especially with our English learners, family boards are so important for a class or something like this, because family boards create a belonging classroom. And a belonging classroom is especially important for students, maybe students with IEPs, students that are English learners, because they might come to our class already feeling a little bit out of place at school, maybe not feeling like they completely fit in, but our classroom is somewhere where they are seen and they are heard. And it's going to be one place where at least one place where they can feel like they're themselves. So I had 4 periods. This is a 9th grade classroom. And I just kind of mixed it up and put pictures of, students studying, or if you look on the right on the bottom, there's Mohammed doing a skateboarding trick. That obviously was a picture that he emailed me. He wanted to show off how high he could jump. And he struggled a little bit academically in class, but where he really thrived was the skate park. And I didn't know that. Obviously, I wasn't hanging out in the skate park at 8 at night like he was. But he wanted to show me, like, look, Miss Pariser, this is me. This is me on the skateboard. And I hung that up in a class and he signed it, half jokingly, but the students asked him to, because it was such a cool trick he was doing. And he felt like he belonged to our classroom. There was a boy, John, and he would sleep through, I don't know how he did it. He slept through 4 periods every day. And the counselor would try to, take him down to the nurse, and we couldn't figure out what was going on. And he just slept through school. We were like, are you not sleeping at night, or what's going on? And he was just completely shut down connection-wise. And one day he came to me and he was giggling, and he gave me this. If you look in the center, there's a scribble doodle of this monster with like a chocolate chip cookie. And he said, here you go. And I think he was kind of half testing to see what I would do. And I hung it on the family board and I said, okay, your masterpiece is going up here. And he was like, what? And so every day after that, when he came into class, he'd look at it, literally point at it, laugh, but he didn't sleep after that, because he felt like he was somewhat seen in this odd way. So if we can create a space where students are students and they can be seen and heard, it's really, really powerful for your class, and the students can do this, which saves you time. This brings me to time management best practice number 6, know when and when not to multitask. So I know what you're thinking right now. How would I not multitask as a teacher? I feel you. We're going to talk about, I'm not asking you not to multitask, but we're going to talk about times when multitasking can be necessary and times when we maybe shouldn't. And I'm going to talk about why. There is a time and place for each. I'm going to first start with a study that I found that we did for one of the chapters, 2 of the chapters. And I found it was really, really interesting with multitasking. It was in 2015, and 168 participants were in this study, ages 6 through 72. Okay, 6, 72. And the study concluded that differences in age groups were statistically significant. So those of you around 40, if you were under 40, you could multitask better than someone over 40, averagely speaking. So as someone that's around that age, I get it. That makes sense, millennials versus non-millennials. So here's the interesting thing. However, out of the 168 participants, only 7 people actually worked faster while multitasking. So yes, under 40, you're better than over 40, but overall, no one's really good. Only 7 of us out of 168 actually work faster, actually more productive, actually work more accurately. So here's the deal. Multitasking doesn't really work for productivity and, more important, accuracy. So bottom line is, if you multitask, it'll take longer to complete the task. But here's something else that's really interesting. In a Forbes article, it also found that multitasking actually temporarily, I want to say temporarily, lowers your IQ more than losing a night's sleep or smoking marijuana. So if we're doing something that we need to do it well and we need to do it thoughtfully, we don't want to be multitasking. And so what are those things? While multitasking is a necessary reality of teaching, there are times we should perform more accurately, presently, and more productive. So these times where I'm going to encourage you not to multitask: lesson planning. We want engaging curriculum. We want it accurate. Student feedback. I'm talking about conferencing with students. Imagine if you're at dinner with a friend and they have or a date, or with your partner, and you have they have a cell phone out and they're answering everything. How does it make you feel? So we don't want our students to feel that way when we're giving feedback or conferencing or something like that. That brings me to conferencing with students. Teaching a lesson. Teaching is like our thing. We're teachers, so we don't want to be multitasking when we're doing that. We want to be giving it our all. And meetings with parents, meetings with students. I know sometimes we do have to be talking to colleagues and things like that as we're doing parent meetings, but it really puts the parent in a weird place, especially today when there's a lot of more etiquette around cell phones. So I put this little thing up here. And the reality is I never multitask, said no teacher ever. So the best teachers are master multitaskers, but the best practice is knowing when it's beneficial and when it's not. And I'm going to also encourage you that if you have to multitask, try to do 2 things at once rather than 10. The next best practice is knowing what's in our control. And it starts off with, if a doctor, lawyer, or dentist had 40 people in his office at a time, all of whom had different needs, and some of whom didn't even want to be there, and some were causing trouble, the doctor, lawyer, or dentist without assistance had to treat them all with professional excellence for 9 months, then he might have some conception of a classroom teacher's job. Who feels that? It's true. So one of the best practices or pieces of advice I can give you about how to get control of your workload is to actually understand where to surrender control. So there are things that are in our control and things that are not in our control. And our superpower comes when we know the difference. So for example, what's not in our control? Class size. But what's in our control? How we seat students so they can collaborate with one another. Paperwork we receive, not in our control. But we can put systems in place for completing paperwork, not in our control. Students choose to do off-task behaviors, whether that's kindergarten or 12th grade. We can't control that, we're not them. But what's in our control? We create systems for addressing and redirecting off-task behaviors. In our control, number of prep periods, maybe we have 3, maybe we have 1 or half. But what's in our control? How we use our limited time in prep periods. Not in our control. The amount of extracurricular activities in our school. What's in our control? Pretty much the amount of non-classroom before school or after school activities we decide to commit to in addition to our teaching load. Not in our control, the amount of grading to be completed. In our control, how we put systems in place for when we grade. That's when we can use that timer. And that brings me to best practice number 4. I love this one. Help students manage their time, because that actually saves teachers time. And I'm going to explain how. So when we help students manage their time, students will submit their work on time, and think of how much time this will save us. Students will feel empowered and confident. We won't have to waste time following up on late work or placing calls to students' homes. Students with good time management skills will enjoy a better quality of life. Teaching these skills is important with high poverty areas where children may not have role models with strong time management skill. That is a reality. It could also be a cultural reality as well. Time management skills will greatly enhance the learning of students with IEPs. Time management and organizational skills may even be in their IEPs. We can use that as data collection. So it's a win-win, which saves us time. And I'm not done. Teaching time management skills will help alleviate student anxiety, depression, stress, and our feelings of being overwhelmed. And that's ever so important today. Lessening our students' stress load means that students will learn more. And when you teach time management skills, students know that we care about them as human beings. And this helps foster a strong connection with students, which leads to 31% fewer behavior issues, which leads to time for you. It's all connected. And so you might be like, okay, yeah, I'm on board for teaching time management, but what does that actually look like? So you take a skill and you give the rationale of a time management skill. So let's say it's teaching students how to use Google Calendar in 6th grade and syncing, I wouldn't call them appointments, but meetings with a teacher. And so you give the rationale, and that could be a short YouTube video, that could be an inspirational quote, that could be anything really short to kind of give the rationale of why they need to know this. Too often we see any sort of life skill, I would call these life skills, taught in a lecture format, like you should know. But let's flip that and teach it as a I want you to know. So you give a rationale. Then you teach it in, let's say, a 20-minute mini lesson, and we can give students opportunities to practice it in class. If they mess up, it's okay. The class practice is part of the learning. And then this is the part we often forget: praise, praise, praise. So when a student does a good job, when a student does show up to the virtual meeting that you planned in 20 minutes, praise, praise, praise that student, because students really want our praise. I'm going to say it again. The praise actually fosters a deeper connection student teacher, which you know what gives us time. So what do time management student strategies look like? It could be like a to-do list. Teaching a student how to make a to-do list is actually a skill. A lot of adults don't even do it, and you try to keep everything in your head and eventually it explodes. I love the next one here. Google Calendar, teaching students how to schedule an appointment with a teacher and show up virtually 5 minutes early, and things like that, what to wear, what kind of background you'd want, or if you need to make a virtual background. You could even make it a game. So students that, let's say, show up 5 minutes earlier on time, get like a little Snickers bar or some sort of points or something like that. An accountability buddy. So we as adults have accountability buddies for working out, for go to the gym, book clubs, fitness goals, nutrition goals. So why wouldn't we give students time management accountability buddies? Social connection is so important towards reaching our goals. And the last one is just really simple, reflection. How did I do today with time management? That could be daily or that could be weekly. And so when can we praise students with time management skills? When they meet deadlines, showing up to meetings, showing up early, remembering meetings without reminders, that gives us more time, finishing assignments without reminders, and completing tasks. Praise, praise, praise. I'm going to switch gears a little bit and talk about something a little bit more serious. I truly believe that secondary trauma should be in every teacher credentialing program in the world. And oftentimes it is not, no fault of the programs, but a lot of times there's so much other stuff to teach that we kind of push secondary trauma to the side. And it's relatively new in the past 5 or 10 years. Not new that it's happening, but new that it's surfacing and we're becoming aware of it. How many of you have heard of secondary trauma? You can put it in the chat. And I heard of it maybe 2 years ago, but The problem is, you can tell I'm getting a little emotional talking about it, is that I was experiencing it all through my teaching career without knowing it. And it wore me down. This is Kyle. And Kyle was what I like to call a connection kid. He was in my 8th grade class, and connection kids are kids that need to connect with us before they learn from us. How many of you guys have had connection kids in your class? Now, Kyle and I connected on more on our humor level. We had the same sense of humor. He was 13 or 14. He was in 8th grade, but he did not connect with every teacher. He was smaller in size, but he had this giggle that could just light up a room. He was very, very emotionally intelligent. He knew how to get under any teacher's skin if he didn't particularly connect with them. But he also knew the world. He probably saw way too much before he was 13 than he needed to. And that, led to who Kyle was. His period 7 was the dean's office, because he was not even, at one point, he wasn't allowed to go into a class because he would walk in and cause so much ruckus trying to get kicked out, because he just was not connecting with the content, not connecting with that teacher. And the reason I have this photo is because my prep was period 7, and I'd walk by the dean's office to get my mail or do whatever in the main office, and he'd go, "What up, Miss Pariser?" And I knew it was inappropriate, but his smile and the way he did it, and I just would always just giggle and like turn and be like, "Kyle, see you later," So I felt like surrogate mom. I was his mentor. I was his joke buddy. I was his teacher. He used to come with his friends and talk and goof around and say like, "I like this class," whatever. And I knew deep down that I was one of Kyle's only hopes to save him from the school to prison pipeline he was kind of in, even in 8th grade. He didn't have a lot of belief in himself, but I had belief in Kyle. And how many of you guys have had students like that, where you know that you might be one of their only hopes, even at a youngish age? Kyle and I worked together to get him his first B- of his life in my class. And I really held his hand figuratively through it, because I knew if he earned one B, something above a C, he would have a little hope for not even going to college, but just making it through the 12th grade. Most of his friends were in gangs and not very good influences from what I could hear, but I saw hope and a spark in Kyle. And I really wanted him to make it. So he earned that B-. And shortly after that, I noticed that his seat was empty in class for Monday, for Tuesday, for Wednesday, for Thursday. And I called home with no answer. And I talked to his girlfriend, who kind of knew more about him than his parents even did. And I asked her, where's Kyle? And she looked down and she said, "Oh, you didn't hear?" And I said, "What?" And I could feel the goosebumps and tingles running through my body, because I knew it wasn't good. And she said, "Kyle was at the wrong place at the wrong time. I don't know if he did it, but he was accused of stealing a car with a couple friends, and he went to court, and he's in juvenile detention." And luckily this is at the end of the day, because even as I talk about it now, I feel tears coming up into my eyes, because I knew Kyle wasn't going to make it. And I could imagine even his size in juvenile detention was so much smaller than the other boys. And I went home and literally curled up into this position and cried, because I couldn't save Kyle. And this is secondary trauma. Secondary trauma is when we hear about the traumatic experiences of a student or another person, and it affects us. And we take on this as teachers. This is who we are. But the problem is that secondary trauma will drain you emotionally, physically, for the other students in your class that need you to be there. And it's not good for our bodies. It doesn't do anything. So it robs us of our time and energy, but there are ways we can prevent it. So prevention is kind of like padding. Prevention means when we hear about something traumatic that's happened, we're not as affected. And meditation, exercise, nutrition, yoga. School counselors could give presentations to the staff about secondary trauma, and school leaders can be trained on secondary trauma. Just teachers knowing about it, because a lot of the students that come to us have experienced trauma. And then what do we do if we've experienced trauma? Well, yoga, get out into nature, enlist in a self-care partner to help you monitor your progress. Exercise is great. I call it gym therapy. Another thing you can do is talk on a voice recorder on your phone and delete it when finished. Sometimes we don't want to keep passing the secondary trauma on. So sometimes if we keep talking to our friends or partners about the horrible things happening to our students over and over again, it actually affects them too. So you're spreading the trauma. Talk it, get it out, and delete. And dance it out. Okay, here's the deal. 67% of the students we work with have experienced trauma. If you are working in inner city or with urban youth, it's going to be higher. So anything we do to shake, bounce, move it out of our body seems counterintuitive to what we want to do, but we need to shake the trauma out of our body. I want to show you what I mean. Who here is a Grey's Anatomy fan? Who's heard of it? Well, the show deals with 3 literally trauma surgeons. And I'm going to show you a little scene of Meredith Grey is the one that walks into the room. And something traumatic has happened with her. It's her blood sister and then her other sister. And they want to cry and lay. And that's what we naturally want to do. But Meredith knows medically that that's not what you do to get the trauma out of your body. Feel free to dance along if you'd like.
Get up.
What is happening?
Come on, get up.
What fair?
Come on, we're dancing it out.
Oh, God, really?
Yes, really. It's this or cry. Come on, get up.
Girls, they shop around the world. Them Chelsea girls, they love the wedding pearls. Come on, no matter where they're from, them girls just wanna have some fun. 2 shake, 1 piece, son. Then we just get nice. Temptation on the run. These girls just wanna have some fun. 2 shake, 1 piece, son. Then we just get nice. She got that booty. Then I'm out of the phone and I call it Trudy. Can't help but yet I miss, excuse me. Not you, not you, not you, but Trudy, Trudy, Trudy. She think I
And it's not that we're being insensitive, but we're looking out for ourselves, because dancing, shaking, bouncing literally resets our nervous system. So the trauma that we hear about is not stuck in our body. The next time management best practice is actually my favorite. It's enjoy your time after school and on weekends. And so there's a quote I like to start with. It's that everything will work again if just for a few minutes you unplug it and plug it back in again, including you. And so I used to teach a student teaching undergrad seminar at University of San Diego. And I always give, and it was a classroom management, time management seminar. And I used to give this assignment towards the end of the semester, is that instead of doing a journal reflection or assignment, I want you to do something this week or weekend that energizes you. We met once a week. So do something that energizes you. Do something where you're not talking about the students. And do something where you are preferably unplugged. And that looked different for a lot of students. This is Christina on my right, and she was a 10th grade chemistry student teacher, chemistry biology. And she decided to read the local newspaper and drink a LaCroix, which she really did not take time to do that before this assignment. And the last part of the assignment was take a picture of yourself doing it, or have someone take a picture of you and maybe hang it next to your desk so you can remember what it looks like to enjoy your time. Now, the second part of the assignment was that they were to write a paragraph or be ready to discuss when it came in. How did they feel on Monday going back, or the day after they did it? And 100% of the student teachers said they were more energized. They were more focused. And in turn, their students were like really behaved. And they were smiling when they came to class. And they were like, oh my gosh, the students could pick up when we were filling our cups. So a lot of times as teachers, we're out there to save the world, and that's wonderful. But we also have to remember to save ourselves, because we have to give to ourselves before we give to anyone else. Now, when we take time to recharge, we're more present for our students. We don't feel resentment for our class for sacrificing our personal time. We have more to give. We're more excited. We give our brains a break, and we actually work faster after we recharge because we're more refreshed. So in the comments now, can you put, how do you recharge? What's your thing? Is it the gym? Is it hiking? And it's interesting, it'll look different for everyone. One of my other students, actually, she emailed me and said, oh my gosh, Serena, thank you so much. My boyfriend and I went and got some cheese and steak and some wine. And I knew I wasn't allowed to talk about the students. And we actually just talked about life and us. And it was just so nice. So thank you. So how do you recharge? And then keep that in mind and do it. And one of the last things I want to talk about is time management best practices, self-care. So a friend of mine once told me that she arrived at work and took off her coat and she realized she was only wearing a slip. She had forgotten to get dressed. So she went home immediately. She was the secretary of a president of a college, so her job was really stressful. No one saw her state of undress, but she obviously was so preoccupied from her stressful job that she'd forgotten a major part of her outfit, her clothes. She told her office mate she had to run back home and drop off a key for the plumber. This is a true story. So this is obviously well, actually it's not an exaggeration. It's a true story of what can happen when we don't take time for self-care and to unplug. It starts with us. And my co-author, well, going back to the other slide, I've heard about teachers that have shown up at school with 2 different socks on. Sound familiar to anyone? I have a friend that's a kindergarten teacher, and she actually wore 2 different earrings without knowing it. And so this all happens when we don't take time to unplug and for self-care. My co-author used to be like I said, a middle school principal. And for his self-care, he needed to take breaks. He needed to unplug. But as we know with principals, you walk around the school, every teacher and student has a million questions to ask you. I know I was guilty of that. And so he once would try to unplug in the custodial closet, and the teachers found him, kids found him, asking questions. So he decided to start checking for leaks on the roof of the middle school every day. And, you know, he never found a leak, but he definitely got the breaks he needed for some self-care. And so we're going to recap the 10 best practices for time management for you. Am I scraping the right car? Get unstuck. Know the difference between busy and productive. Relationships save you time. Know when and when not to multitask. Know what's in your control. Help students manage their time to save us time. Know how to intervene with secondary trauma. Enjoy our time after school and on weekends. And self-care, heck yes. Teachers, I want you to remember that 96% of you report loving your job. You deserve to feel good doing what you love every single day. Thank you. All my information is through this book, Real Talk About Time Management, and stay connected. I'd love to hear how it's going. Have fun the rest of the conference. Good luck with this semester. You are amazing. And I hope to hear from you.